Good morning, and welcome to part 2 of our study of the book of Ecclesiastes. So to get started today, let's read verses 3 to 11 of chapter 1. Verse 3 says, "What profit has a man through all his labor in which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away, and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. The sun also rises, and the sun goes down, and hastens to the place where it arose. The wind goes toward the south, and turns around to the north. The wind whirls around continually, and comes again on its circuit. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which the rivers come, there they return again. All things are full of labor. Man cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. That which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which it may be said, 'See, this is new'? It has already been in ancient times before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come by those who will come after." If you read this is somewhat of a depressing type of expose. But you have to remember Solomon. Solomon really had it all. He was a king. He had power. He reigned at a time when there was peace in Israel. He had prestige and favor of the people. There were no wars. He therefore could devote himself to other pursuits. He was considered the most wise of all people. He also was the richest man on earth. And he had many, many attributes. When he was a young man, David, in chapter 1 of 1 Kings, wrote down what he was to do, what he was to become, how he was to conduct himself. And he gave the instructions to Solomon to maintain his love of God and to be always faithful to God. It said in chapter 2, "Therefore prove yourself a man, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, his judgments, and his testimonies, as it was written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you turn." And Solomon did this for many years. But as he became older, he became more separated from God. He took on over 700 wives and princesses, along with 300 concubines. Many were from foreign countries. And it says in chapter 11, "King Solomon loved many foreign women, as well as the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, the Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites, from the nations of whom the Lord had said to the children of Israel, 'You shall not intermarry with them, nor they with you. Surely they will turn your hearts away after their gods.'" And this is what happened in Solomon's later life. He became separated from God and turned to the foreign gods, the foreign idols of these countries. And his separation from God developed. He understood what life was really like without God in his life. And as an old man, probably approaching his death, he wrote this book, giving the idea of what life is like without God, without a personal God in your life. And this is why this book is depressing, because without God, there really is no meaning to anyone's life. So that's what he's saying in this first chapter. What profit does a man have for all his labors? The toil that man does, the labors that man does, what profit does it really have in the end? It says in Genesis that by the toil of your brow you will work. By the sweat of your face you will develop, you will grow. And this is what has been happening. We have been doing this ever since. We've been toiling, we've been laboring. But what profit in the end does it really have? One generation comes, it dies. Another generation takes its place, it does the same thing, it passes away, and so forth. We just go through the same cycles. And Solomon uses three examples to this. He uses the example of the sun. The sun rises in the east, it sets in the west, and it's been doing this every day since the creation. It never changes. It's the same every day, the same all the time. The sun rises, the sun sets, it goes back, it rises again. And we know actually the world goes around the sun, not vice versa, but in Solomon's time they felt the sun revolved around the earth. And we still sort of use that connotation today. And the same with the winds. Solomon was a bit of a meteorologist because he's talked about the circuit of the winds long before the actual circuitry of the winds was known by science. But he talks about the wind going to the south, then turning to the north, and circling around again and doing the same thing, the same type of circulation that has developed, and is going on all the time. This is continuous activity that never seems to change. No matter what we do, it never seems to change. And the same again with the sea. It rains, rivers fill up, they flow to the sea evaporates, goes back up into the clouds, it rains, fills the rivers into the sea. This is the hydrologic cycle, again, which was not known in Solomon's time, but which Solomon had some indication of, some insight into. He talks about the continuation of this constant change, but which never really changes at all. And he says, all things are full of labor. Man cannot express it, man cannot understand it, but everything that is done has work to it. And no matter what we do, we're never really satisfied. It's the futility which is expressed in these statements. Man is never satisfied. No matter what we see, we're never satisfied by it. No matter what we hear, we're never satisfied with it. The entertainment industry thrives on this because it keeps giving us information, data about people, about things, about events. We go to baseball games, we go to hockey games, we go to basketball games, enjoy them at the time, but in the end, what really is the difference? So who wins the championship? Does it really make a difference in the end of man's life? Does it really make a difference in what people in the entertainment business do? Movies are nice to see. Entertainment is nice to be at. But in the end, does it really make any difference? Are we really satisfied by it? Because the more we have, the more we seem to need, or the more we seem to want. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, and the ear is not filled with hearing. No matter what we understand, it's always a futility in life. James, in the book Searching for Heaven and Earth, David Jeremiah talks about Jack Higgins, who was the author of the book The Eagle Has Landed, and he writes this statement. He says, when you get to the top, there's nothing there. And this is the idea. No matter what we get, no matter what we obtain, no matter what we do, there's really nothing at the end of the journey. It's really meaningless. And In his statement, is there anything new under the sun? This is new. Is there anything actually which has not been done before? Now we find new discoveries all the time. We have new medications. We have new developments in machinery and in mechanics and in science. But we're really not doing anything new. What we're doing is just applying what has always been there in a way which is more useful to us. We're discovering the secrets that have been there all along. We're not really developing anything new. And as a result of this, there is nothing new. We're just doing the same thing over and over and over again. The futility of the cycle that we go through, of being born, of working, we work to obtain the things that we want or feel we need. Then we retire. Sometimes we're not able to enjoy those things anymore because we're not have the physical strength or the physical abilities. And then eventually we die, to be replaced by another generation that does the same thing over and over again. And then meanwhile, the earth just goes on. The sun rises, the winds blow, the seas fill, rains come. It's the same thing over and over again. And meanwhile, in the sweat of our brow, we labor and toil in these circumstances. It has already been said that there is nothing new because nothing really is new. We may discover what has already been there, but in a sense, it's not really new. It says there's no remembrance of past things, and many times this means that there's no remembrance of past people. People have been in the past, they die, they leave, in a few years, many people are forgotten. There's another story in this book of David Jeremiah's, which talks about a college student who wrote a suicide note, and he said, to anyone in the world who cares, who am I? Why am I living? Life has become stupid and purposeless. Nothing makes sense anymore. The questions I had when I came to college are all answered, and now I am convinced there are no answers. There can only be pain and guilt and despair here in this world. My fear of death and the unknown is far less terrifying than the prospect of the unbearable frustration, futility, and hopelessness of continued existence. It's a sad comment by a young man who committed suicide shortly after he went to college because he could not find the answers to anything that he wanted. Lee Strobel apparently became an atheist after he went to university because he could not get answers to questions that he had. But it was only after he looked into the Christianity in a detailed manner that he realized the actual purpose of life and the answers to the questions that he had. And he wrote the book after that, The Case for Christ, The Case for Faith, and other books of the same. In another story from the book by David Jeremiah, he writes this of a rabbi telling of a man who came to see him. And this man said, 2 weeks ago, said the man, for the first time in my life, I went to the funeral of a man my own age. I didn't know him well. We worked together, talked to each other from time to time, had kids about the same age. He died suddenly over the weekend. It could just as easily have been me. That was 2 weeks ago. They have already replaced him at the office. I hear his wife is moving out of state to live with her parents. 2 weeks ago he was working 50 feet away from me, but now it's as if he never existed. It's like a rock falling into a pool of water, and then the water is the same as it was before, but the rock isn't there anymore. Rabbi, I've hardly slept at all since then. I can't stop thinking that it could happen to me, and a few days later I will be forgotten as if I had never lived. Shouldn't a man's life be more than that? Solomon says, There is no remembrance of former things or people, nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come, but those that will come after. What is man's life? What is the meaning of life? Solomon is writing this from the viewpoint of there being no God, there being no spiritual, personal relationship with God in your life. What is the meaning of it? Is all we have, all we're going to have, what we have now? Is all our labors that we do, all the work that we do, all the things that we obtain, what's really the purpose? No one takes anything with them. We're all going to pass away eventually. What is the real meaning of life? What is our existence? Is this the only thing we have? Is this all there is? This is what this book is about, because Solomon is writing this from the viewpoint of there being no God in one's life. Is it depressing? Yes, it is. But it gets better, because there is a God in our life. And this is what Solomon brings out in later chapters. But in the meantime, he goes into more detail about how life is without God, how life is under the sun, and goes through the aspects of it all. So, this is enough for today. We'll get into the rest of chapter 1 and into the part of chapter 2 in our next session. So thanks for watching. I hope you'll join me next week. Bye for now.